To kick off?
Yep, we can start when you're ready.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I can see faces appearing. Morning. Okay, it's now just after 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 27th of June, 2023. Time to begin this hearing session. Before I proceed, can I check that everyone can hear me? Just give me a thumbs up or a wave.
Fine.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. During the session, it'd be ideal if participants could please keep their cameras switched on, but mute their microphones except when speaking. This is just to help ensure people can hear what's being said. My name is Philip McLean. I'm a reporter with the Scottish Government's Planning and Environmental Appeals Division, or DPEA. I've been appointed jointly with David Bouya, Principal Reporter, to report to Ministers on this called-in planning application, and Mr. Bouya is here with me in the DPA office. The application is for the erection of holiday accommodation, sui generis, on land adjacent to Ferrycraigs House, Ferry Road, North Queensferry. It was originally made to Fife Council, which was minded to grant planning permission against the advice of Transport Scotland. In these circumstances, the Council was required to refer the application to Scottish ministers, who consider the issues raised would benefit from further scrutiny by ministers. They have therefore exercised their powers to call in the application for their own determination. We will prepare a report to ministers on the application, and it will then be for them to decide whether or not to approve it. Having considered the application and the documents submitted with it, and the subsequent written exchanges, I decided to hold a hearing session in order to complete my consideration of the application. The procedure notice for the hearing sessions issued on the 3rd of May and specified the matter that will be considered today. This is the proposal's potential impact on trunk road infrastructure, specifically the Forth Road Bridge. I'm grateful to the parties for participating today to discuss this. The procedure notice also explained that no other matters relevant to the application would be considered at the hearing. While we will address these other matters in our report, we're satisfied that we already have enough information on them and we will not be discussing them today. Before I set out broadly the procedure we'll follow today, there's a few formalities that I must cover. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live, and Lucy Wakeham, a member of our IT team, who you met earlier, will remain online in case of any technical difficulties. In due course, the recording will be available to view on our website. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to the recording, storage, and use of this material for the purposes of webcasting, training, and the keeping of records that are accessible by members of the public. If you're not already familiar with it, this platform offers a grid view to allow you to see all the parties participating, which you might find helpful. As I mentioned, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We'll do our best to keep an eye on participants to watch for someone raising their hand or waving, so please do that if you want to attract our attention or to contribute at any time. And please ensure mobile phones are on silent, please. I haven't planned any formal break in today's meeting, but I'll review this after about an hour to see if parties feel a short break would be useful, taking account of progress through the agenda, and I'm anticipating we'll be finished before lunchtime. So I'd like to now invite the lead participant for each party present to introduce themselves and the members of their team participating today. And can I start with the applicant and agent, please?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Ian Forbes. I'm the architect. And me is Juliet Hamilton, who is my client.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Can I move on to the council, please?
Good morning. My name is Derek Simpson. I'm a lead officer with Fife Council, and with me is Brian Forsyth, who is a planning officer and was the case officer for the application.
Thank you very much. And Transport Scotland, please.
Good morning. My name is Gerard McPhillips. I'm the Development Management Quality Manager for the South East of Scotland. So this application has come across my desk. With me today is Denise Angus, who's also from Development Management. She heads the team. We've got David Bishop from our operating company, Bayer, and Jason Cheetham from our Bridges section. Jason and David are both responsible for the inspection and maintenance of the Forth Road Bridge. Oh, apologies, Billy. We've got Billy Minto as well. Billy's come along in place of Cameron Gare, who's unfortunately on leave this week.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Good morning to you all. I'd now like to explain the process to be followed today. Our report to ministers will be based on the written material before us, along with the evidence to be discussed at today's hearing session. The purpose of the hearing is to ensure that we understand each party's position and the evidence that it's based on. The format will be structured around a discussion that I will lead. The main points I will seek further information on are listed in the agenda that was circulated to you by email on the 16th of June. Depending on the discussion, we may have additional follow-up questions. Now, just check, does everybody have a copy of the agenda? Give me a wave or a nod. Yeah, that's grand. Thank you very much. Documents will not be shared on screen during the hearing, and participants are expected to access these as necessary on their own devices. All documents for the case are published on the DPA website under the case reference NA-250-001. If you're referring to documents, please make sure you clearly identify which document and direct me to the relevant sections. Throughout the session, I will invite particular parties to contribute at appropriate times. There'll be no formal presentation of cases or cross-examination by other parties. I'll leave it to each party to decide which of its participants will answer questions put to it. I should highlight that my role is to understand and test parties' positions, so if I'm questioning or probing on a particular point, this should not be taken as indicating that I necessarily disagree with what's been said. My aim is just to ensure that I have sufficient understanding of the arguments so that I can report these to ministers. I would welcome comments and questions on relevant matters from any participant as the discussion progresses, and will seek to invite comments as we go along. All questions should be put through me, please. If you do wish to make a comment or a question at a particular point, please either use the raise hand function in Teams or physically raise your hand so that I can see this on screen. If you disagree with something being said, please let the party finish what they're saying before seeking to make comments. I do accept that it can be possible to speak over someone accidentally in virtual meetings, but please do your best to wait your turn. Please also bear in mind that I will be taking notes. I may need to ask parties to pause after making a point to ensure that I've noted it down before moving on to the next point. I will, though, seek to adopt a fairly brisk pace through the agenda and indicate when I consider there's been sufficient clarification on any particular issue, and will then move on. So before we get into the agenda, is everybody clear on the procedures? Are there any questions about them or any other procedural matters that anybody wants to raise before we move on? Well, I'm seeing shaking heads. That's fine, thank you. So in that case, we'll move on to the main agenda, which is starting with item 2. I want to start by clarifying certain points relating to access to the bridge piers. As set out in the procedure notice, I observed on my site inspection that a number of the bridge piers are in unfenced land, and this area can be accessed on foot via the existing track to the east of the application site. Transport Scotland's hearing statement indicates that scaffolding has been used in the past for works on these piers, and it also indicates that biannual inspections are needed that are carried out on foot and using mobile elevating work platforms, or MEWPs. My first question, item 2A, is simply to ask for an explanation of what a mobile elevating work platform is and how it operates. I think I may know what one is, but I would wish to confirm if my understanding is correct. So can I ask Transport Scotland, please, to comment on that?
David or Jason, thank you.
Yep, happy to comment on that. Thanks, Chair. So a mobile elevated working platform essentially is a cherry picker or a device that's used to lift people or maintenance operatives equipment from the ground up to working at high levels. Now, there's various different types of mobile elevated working platform, from small scissor-less type that can lift 5 meters to the largest variety that can lift up to 50 meters or 24 meters horizontally. There's also devices that can be used above deck, so that a vehicle would sit on the bridge above the deck and lift operatives and people below the deck to carry out works below the deck.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'll ask other parties for any comments in a moment, but in terms of, obviously you've mentioned that there could be ground-based ones or some on the bridge deck. In terms of the ones on the ground, how would they come to the site?
So depends on the type. Most of them will come on an Arctic lorry, be delivered, and then they'll either be track based or will have rubber wheels and drive themselves from the Arctic lorry and then be used to access from decent ground. These mutes can't be used on really steep or difficult ground. Normally good footing is required, and then the idea of the MUP is then to gain quick and easy access to lift personnel and equipment up to the piers, up to the deck to carry out maintenance works.
Okay, thank you. And one just further follow-up question that was just to check that the reference to biannual means twice a year rather than every 2 years.
I think it meant every 2 years.
Every 2 years, okay.
Yeah. So we have various inspection requirements. So we have every 6 years we've got a principal inspection requirement where we have to physically get within touching distance of every element of the bridge. The gantry that is currently permanently in place that runs on the top of the deck is used to access most of the deck above the pier levels. Piers are then used to either access using a device such as a mute or roped access, depending on difficulty of access. Every 2 years, we have GI or general inspection requirements where we need to inspect every element of the bridge, but we don't need to have physical touching distances. So every 2 years, we may use MUPs, but it's not a definitive requirement that we have to use MUPs.
Can you just, you said GI there, I didn't catch what it stood for.
Just a general inspection.
General
PI
inspection,
is principal inspection, and GI is general inspection.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Do other parties have any comments they want to make on what's just been said? I'll start with well, I can see the applicant's agent's hand up, so I'll come to you first.
Yes, thank you. Can you just tell me what was the maximum height they can go up to at the moment? Near use.
It's limited by the product. Essentially, you can get ones as large as 50 meters. You can get ones at 25 meters. I think there's no limit really. It's whatever you can buy on the market.
No, it was just I thought you were going up to a maximum of 20 meters. It's just the fact that the gantry is pier 3 was 27 meters and the pier 4 was 23 meters, 22 meters. I wasn't sure it was because I've had been up and down. I've used the lifts, shares at time, science that.
You can get really large ones, but you can get small scissor lifts as well. There's just whatever's on the market, and you can find really large ones on the market.
Does the council have any comments at this stage? No. Okay, that's fine. If there's no further comments on that point, we'll move on. My next question at 2B, just a follow-up question on this. Transport Scotland indicates that suitable clearance would be required from scaffolding or MEWPs used to inspect or maintain the bridge piers, and that the proposal may inhibit this. I'd just like to explore Transport Scotland's understanding of what suitable clearance might mean and what implications the proposal might therefore have in this respect. So again, to Transport Scotland, please.
I'm happy to try and answer this question. Essentially, what we're looking to do is lift people, personnel up and maintenance equipment to carry out works. Obviously, we don't have a full list of the works that are required to carry out over the years. The bridge is going to certainly be there for the next 60 years, so we do not have a definitive list of every reason why we need to go up and inspect and maintain these piers. In the past, there has been significant maintenance, but I can assure you the bridge requires significant more maintenance. There's deterioration of both the concrete deck and of the steel boxes that require refurbishment, re-waterproofing, blasting and painting to extend the life, essentially, of the structure. Now, the proposed when we're carrying out any of that maintenance work, our first goal is to eliminate risks. Any works that we're carrying out under health and safety requirements, we need to eliminate risk wherever we can, and the best way to eliminate risks is to reduce the interface with the public, and so anywhere we can try and eliminate public from our works. Now, the proposed development is quite close to the bridge, particularly the piers and the deck, and so we have raised concerns that potentially we might be trying to carry out works in close proximity to the residents coming to the cottage, either parking near the cottage, I don't know if it's the new proposed dwelling, or parking on the land itself, or accessing the land directly around it. I think any increase in public footfall is against what we want. While we're doing maintenance, the less public there is around there in general helps us do work. And so when we would be carrying out this works, what we would do is we would, erect temporary fencing and an area to exclude public coming to areas so that we can carry out maintenance works.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. There isn't, I presume, a specific distance. Am I sort of correct in understanding from what you've just said in the submissions that would depend on the particular nature of the works?
Yeah, that's right. Depending on what we're doing, there's no specific distance, and we can certainly carry out works in different ways to try and mitigate measures. But the easiest and safest method, we believe, is to eliminate the face with public.
Just before I invite comment from anybody else, I wanted to also understand the reference to sufficient clearance in the context of scaffolding or MEWPs. Is that the same or something slightly different from drop zones and exclusion zones, which we've got on a later agenda item? Or is there something specific to what we're talking about here that's slightly different to that?
Probably slightly different. There's a working room of a vehicle that you don't want to get within that working zone, and you need suitable clearance to do that. As you're working at height, then it probably is very similar that there's a potential for an exclusion zone. You would want to set up an exclusion zone to prevent interface with public.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Does any other party want to come in and comment on any of that, the council or the applicant? Shaking heads. I think no. Okay, if there's no further comments, then we'll move on. So moving on to item 3 on the agenda, which is to get a bit more understanding of excavation of the northwest anchorage. I'm aware from the written submissions that Transport Scotland is concerned about the potential for the proposal to inhibit any required excavation of bridges north anchorages that may be required for inspection or maintenance purposes. My understanding from your hearing statement is that your concern is not that excavation would be impossible if the proposed development was implemented, but rather that any excavation would be likely to be more difficult and costly. We'll come on in a moment to discuss detailed considerations, but just in broad terms, is that an accurate reflection of Transport Scotland's position? Was I seeing a nod there?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Before I move on to the next item, just any comments from the council or applicant? We'll move on to 3B. So item 3B is referring to Transport Scotland's response to question 6 of the procedure notice, which outlines various engineering considerations that might arise for an excavation of the north anchorages, assuming that the proposal had been implemented. It states, quote, further engineering solutions will be required depending on the depth of rock, specific GI, assessment for dwelling, surcharge loading, installation of shoring or piling could be used. So I'd just like to understand this a bit better. Can I ask Transport Scotland to explain these various terms mentioned and what their possible implications could be in this instance, just so that I'm clear on what's meant by all of these?
Yeah, I can try and explain. Essentially, when we're carrying out investigations or when we're carrying out excavation, the key thing that we need to do is understand the ground conditions. We understand so we need to carry out specific GI, which is ground investigations in this instance. That can be carried out through boreholes or whatever trial pit excavations that are required to understand the ground conditions, which will give you an indication of the overlying conditions, and the underlying rock, the type of rock, the formation of the rock, and how difficult it is to excavate. I guess the concern, and it's depending on whether we do have to carry out this investigation, because we have had to carry it out on the south. It may be required on the north. We don't know. Certainly, the bridge will be there for a long time, and it may be a requirement in the future that this excavation has to happen in a similar location, or it might have to happen, further, at a much greater depth than the previous excavation. So the other terms that I'm referring to is dwelling surcharge loading. Essentially, what we meant by that is the foundations of the dwelling are supported by the ground, and they pose a surcharge or vertical load on the ground. If we excavate and undermine the foundation, essentially, of the dwelling, then that surcharge loading could compromise the integrity of the dwelling or the rock below it. And there's a concern there that we would have to
So Bishop's just frozen there, certainly for me. And we'll just hold on a moment and see if we can get better connection. Does anybody else in Transport Scotland want to comment on this
Yeah, I can jump in.
point? In the meantime, I think he's just left, and hopefully we'll rejoin. But if you want to comment in the meantime,
yeah, I can jump in while Dave log back in. I think the key point we was trying to make there is if we do have to excavate the soil around proposed dwelling, we'd have to do extensive propping to enable that the structure isn't undermined, and that would extend the program of the works, add to any health and safety considerations, and also potentially undermine the proposed dwelling. So if we was going to do any proposed works around the proposed dwelling, there'd have to be mitigating factors put in place, which might even lead to us saying, can you vacate that property during the works, which is not an ideal situation. So I think that's what Dave was probably going to say before he jumped off there.
okay, that's helpful. I'm
sorry, I've lost connection there. I've dialed back in using hotspot, so apologies.
No problem. Your colleague touched on a couple of points. I think we certainly from our end, you were frozen for a good minute or so before you left. But if you want to just sort of pick up where you were, I think your sort of last comment that I noted was talking about potential to compromise the integrity of the building.
Yes, so any excavation that's in close proximity to the dwelling could undermine the foundations. And to prevent that undermining, we would need to ensure that doesn't happen. So we could install shoring or piling, which is essentially props or steel props that would support the foundations or the ground rock that the dwelling is sitting on. Again, this is quite hypothetical because we don't know the conditions there, and we certainly don't know who would be carrying out this works. But highlighting that it is a possibility. The other consideration that I touched on, we mentioned in the response to question 6 was because of the close proximity to the dwelling, excavation of hard ground rock could cause quite a lot of vibration, which could affect the dwelling itself through vibration. And so techniques to limit vibration might be considered, such as hydrodemolition or flooring excavation, which should be more time consuming.
Could you, again, I will invite others to comment in a moment, but could you just touch on what these techniques are, explain hydrodemolition to me briefly and the other thing that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so I guess a standard excavation with rock might be to use a large JCB with at the end of it's got a picker on it or such device that essentially breaks the rock into fractures the rock and then allows it to a JCB will scoop and remove it. That causes a lot of vibration. So an alternative might be to use high pressure water that's fed in at such a high pressure that it actually breaks the rock, and that has a lot less vibration. But you also get robots, etc., that can do that to the rock. Other possibilities is to use coring equipment, which is basically a drill but much larger. That takes in, essentially does big cores and then breaks off the cores and individually moves segments of rocks.
Thank you. That's useful. I think I'll bring in other parties at this point. If anybody has any comments, yes, the applicant.
Yeah. A couple of questions, really. One, we carried out a site investigation of the site itself, mainly drainage, to be honest, and it is definitely rock underneath the site, a reasonably shallow depth. So we know our site's on rock and it's actually the entrance to a quarry. With regards to the south anchors, when you did the excavation there, you obviously took the decision to do a vertical excavation with props and piles, pile shuttering and so on. What was the consideration there that you used that method to excavate rather than just excavating as you've suggested for the North Pier?
I wasn't involved specifically on that scheme back in 2013, so I don't know the reason why they chose to do that. I know there's a I don't know. I can hypothesize. I can assume that it might be because of land access issues or to try and contain the site as much as possible. I don't know why they use being nice.
That's the there's the arena and so on, so there was plenty of room. I just wondered the reason for that. The other question I had was, do you have any record photographs of when the original anchors were placed down on the north side of the river?
Yeah, so we've got quite a few pictures, and there's actually a video showing some of the original construction, and the anchorage is quite long, up to 40 meters in length, and goes quite depth. And so there's pictures and videos at the bottom side. There was a shaft there that was filled up with concrete at the end of the construction, and you can see the construction within both the anchorage chambers, but also of the deep excavation within rock carried out. There's some GI information available from the historical records, but we haven't taken that information recently and sent it to a geotechnical engineer to interpret any further. But we do have records of the original construction.
Does the council want to come in at any point at the moment? No. Just a follow-up on this, just to help my understanding, is to what extent would these engineering considerations in the event of an excavation being needed, to what extent are they unique to this proposal, or might they also arise even in the absence of this proposal, given the proximity of other existing development? Again, question to Transport Scotland, please.
Yeah, I think there's an existing dwelling. I don't know how far, but maybe 15 meters to the west, Ferrycraig House, and similar considerations will need to be considered for that house. If we were going to carry out excavation, we would be proposing to carry out dilapidation surveys, which is an inspection of the existing property to make sure that any vibration of it or excavation that we carried out didn't damage the existing property. Similarly, the structure, the existing structure is further away, so that there's less impact in terms of surcharge loading, etc., on any excavation. But similar considerations will need to be required.
Thank you. Noting that down. Any comments on that before I move on to item 3C on the agenda? No. Okay. So I want to pick up on the council's position set out in its committee reports at paragraph 2.5.5, that Transport Scotland's concerns regarding access and maintenance of the bridge cannot be given significant weight, as they are more properly addressed through its land acquisition or other powers. Having said that, the council's position in the report is that these matters are material planning considerations. I'd like to understand the views of the council and other parties on whether these various practical and financial considerations that we've discussed under the last two agenda items are material planning considerations that ministers need to take account in their decision. Alternatively, are they separate legal or financial matters out with the scope of the planning process or perhaps you consider that they might be both. I think in the first instance, I would like comments from the council on that, please.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, as we set out in the report, we did accept that the bringing in close proximity of a sort of more sensitive use in proximity to the bridge in relation to the operation and maintenance of the bridge was a material consideration. But there was a distinction between that and where access was required, but potentially onto the site, which is in third-party ownership, which would, those aspects of it which require access to the site would be private matters between the two landowners. And we accepted that they were material considerations in the context that they were raised by a statutory consultee in their submissions to the planning application. Albeit the weight we attached to that was balanced against our understanding of that statutory consultee's role and function as a statutory consultee, which is usually more considered in terms of impact on capacity of the trunk road network and new accesses, rather than something like we're looking at today, which is a bit out of the ordinary in that respect. And we're also mindful of NPF 4 policy 13G, which came into effect after the decision was made, which does make reference to the impact on strategic infrastructure. However, again, it seems to be more directed towards the impact upon the capacity, traffic road network capacity, rather than maintenance. But it does point towards, it does mention to ensure the continued safe and effective operation of the network with regards to that. So we do accept they are material. We don't attribute too much weight to these issues in terms of how we came to our decision, because they do at certain points stray into matters which we consider to be private legal ones between the two different landowners.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Can I ask if Transport Scotland has any comments on that they want to make? Yes.
Can you just confirm what a material consideration is, just for clarity, please?
I mean, it's. I suppose the relevance here is factors that ministers will need to take account of in terms of being relevant to planning and this planning decision, rather than other considerations that cannot be taken into account.
That's what I thought it was. Just one cloud. Just for consideration, obviously, the council commented regarding the use of the infrastructure for the road network. Currently, the structure's a public transport corridor, holds, carries buses and taxis. It's also a listed structure. So therefore, there should be some kind of consideration made for keeping the structure standing. And this is probably where Dave and I are coming in terms of making it safe to maintain. And there's always that what if question, isn't there? If we need to do some work on piers and the anchorages, would we be able to do that safely for every party concerned?
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody else in Transport Scotland before I invite the applicant to come in?
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, we agree with the council that our considerations are material considerations. I guess it comes down to the weight that you wish to put onto those material considerations. Our material consideration is primarily the safety of the operatives of getting access to our bridge and being able to maintain it in a safe way. There are cost implications, I appreciate that, which are not necessarily material considerations. But I think what you need to not lose sight of is the correlation between an increased cost, an increased time, and then an increased time that the operatives are exposed to the risk. And I think that is a material consideration. And therefore, we certainly believe that our duty is to maintain and inspect this bridge in a safe manner. We have been consulted as a statutory consultee. We were consulted on the 2018 application, the 2019 application, and the 2021 application. We've always maintained our position that the bridge lies within the envelope, the inspection envelope, for maintenance and inspection, and therefore, we stand by our position on that. As you say, there are cost implications, but these are not necessarily the biggest driver in our argument, if you like. Our biggest driver is the safety and the extra danger that the additional time we would expose our operatives to.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to come in at this point with any comments?
Just really just two, really. One, obviously, the land that it's 14, 15 metre strip on either side of the bridge was obviously allocated for maintenance. It's built. I understand, obviously, a lot of the rules change and methods of doing things change, but the land out with the designated area for maintenance for the bridge was obviously sold off. So at the time, there was no restriction on the land out with, and obviously they built the houses at the east side, and the land itself was sold to my client's parents at the time. On the south side of the bridge, there is significant properties. Okay, the height of the bridge is the same, but there are significant properties and land very close to the bridge. And I was just wondering how you deal with that if you're doing with maintenance on the south side, because obviously you've got sort of more closer proximity to people in their gardens and that close to the bridge where you do maintenance. Do you actually notify them and get to stay out with the houses or gardens if you're doing maintenance on that side? So material planning consideration is really more for the land designated strip down outside, which was designated for maintenance, and the land with that strip was designated for future, sold off for other people to use as they saw fit, which is what we're obviously doing.
Casper, Scotland, want to come back on that?
I'll let David and Jason comment about the maintenance arrangements. As far as the land being sold, it was sold in 1978 by the previous Forth Road Bridge Joint Board. I think we can all appreciate that was 45 years ago, and the health and safety requirements 45 years ago were considerably less than the health and safety requirements which they are now. The distances and the setback distances that Jason and David need to work to now are considerably higher. If we had the opportunity again, I don't think we would have sold the land. In fact, we have tried on several occasions to try and buy the land back from the applicant. I see Mrs. Hamilton-Lee shaking her head. That's what I'm advised. I've been advised several times that we've tried to buy the land back, but we can't reach agreement on the price. I think if we had our time again, we wouldn't have sold the land. If we had our time again, we wouldn't have buildings as close as they are. We have to make the most of what we've got, but we don't want to encourage any additional development where it's not necessary.
I think the next agenda item briefly touches on the question of land purchase and what the other options might be. I can see a hand up, Mr. Minto.
Yeah, could I just add, I mean, the properties in the south side are a lot further away than in this potential one. So just to make that clear.
Yeah, I think the properties near the Hopetoun junction, the height of the pier is a lot less. The gardens do extend into basically similar to what's in the north. I think in the north, the Ferrybands Court properties are significantly further away than the proposed dwelling. In the south side, essentially, what has happened in terms of maintenance in the past is about 30 years ago, maintenance had been carried out. And maintenance in sort of that time there was a lot less health and safety requirements, and so blasting and painting was carried out, and they had very little containment. So essentially, blasting is the form of getting grit and high pressure grit firing at the surface of the steel, which removes the paint, and then that prepares a surface that allows paint to be applied. So when it was last done, it was done without any containment. Paint and grit fell into residence gardens. Health and safety, and correctly, I believe, have come in and won't allow that carried out anymore. So essentially, that has put a hold on any maintenance works near Hopetoun Junction. So very little maintenance works have been carried out in the last 30 years near Hopetoun Junction. We don't have a solution for how we carry out that maintenance works, with the exception of the bearing replacement works, which are on the piers. We've carried out very little maintenance on the outside of the footways or the parapets or the concrete deck, and these are elements that are deteriorating, and we will need to devise a solution for the south viaduct, and we will need to devise a solution for the north viaduct. But as of yet, it probably will come to an extensive scaffolding solution, and residents will be affected. Major maintenance works hasn't been carried out recently.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments just on that point before we move on to point D, which does pick up on the question of land purchase? No. Okay. So the points that have been made in terms of Transport Scotland wishing to purchase the site is not in itself a matter for us to consider in our report, but to understand the context of this, I would just like to confirm whether Transport Scotland has any powers to carry out engineering operations such as excavation or other relevant works on land that it does not control. So in other words, if the site were to remain privately owned and Transport Scotland considers works are required, what would be the process that would need to be followed to enable such work to take place? So again, question for Transport Scotland in the first instance, please.
Want me to answer, Jason?
I'm about to go. I can go with Road Scotland Act section 140 gives powers of entry to undertake any works required if deemed necessary. So if there's an emergency or risk to the structure under those powers, we can gain access. I don't know what the full process will be, but it's just in case there's obviously if there's an emergency or a need. For instance, if the anchorages were showing signs of distress or failure, we would just go in and try and mitigate any issues and repair it, as opposed to gain access to site first. So they are currently the powers that we would be looking to use if there is any need to access land within the envelope of the bridge that isn't owned by the Scottish ministers.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. Just to sort of clarify, I don't have the wording of the Act in front of me, but from what you've said, would those powers only be exercisable in an emergency or something of that nature, rather than for more routine operations? Is that your understanding?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. Does the council want to comment on that at all? No. Does the applicant have any comments? No. Just I do have a sort of follow-up question, which is really just bringing back in the question of what is material to the decision on this planning application. Are there any sort of comments on the extent to which the availability of these other powers that we've just touched on, the extent to which that is a material consideration in itself to be considered in this application? Just before we move on, is there any further comments that people would like to make on that? Council?
Yeah, our view would that would be that if there's other routes to deal with the matter which can be dealt with the planning process or legislation, then that is a material consideration for us as to how material that issue is. If there's other powers that sit out with the planning powers to deal with the matter which is being raised as in this instance.
Okay, thank you. And I think I saw the applicant wants to come in as well.
Yeah, my one question would be has Transport Scotland ever accessed the site for any reason whatsoever in the last 20, 50, 60 years? And I think my client would also like to address a point that was raised in the last point item regarding the offering to buy the land.
Yeah, I'm starting in the sort of last 20 odd years. I'm not aware of any offer apart from the sort of comment that was in an email, I think it was 2017 or 2018, about possibly buying a piece of land. There certainly hasn't been any discussions and negotiations that I am aware of. The point of doing this originally was to try and create an income for my parents so that they didn't end up dependent on the council from the point of view of funding, which they had, given that their age. So, that was the point now, given that my dad's no longer with us and my mother is quite ill. The requirement for originally building is no longer there, and therefore, I would consider selling the land, but that is something that has happened in the last 2 years as a change in circumstance.
Thank you. Does Transport Scotland want to comment on the point about whether or not it's ever needed to access the site in the past?
I don't know the answer. I have got no reports of needing to use the land. I don't know if anyone has.
Okay. Any further comments before the applicant come back in?
Okay, well, I lived in the house between 1966 and 1992, and it was never accessed.
It was Ferrycraigs.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. I think we'll move on then if there's no further comments on item 3. Then we'll move on to item 4, which is just to understand inspection and maintenance works at height. So Transport Scotland's further written submissions response refers to several pieces of legislation and guidance regarding health and safety considerations, and it uses the terms exclusion zones and drop zones and indicates those developments would be within the bridge drop zone. I asked for clarification on these terms in question 9 of the procedure notice, and Transport Scotland's hearing statement introduces a further term, danger zone, and references another piece of legislation. I do appreciate that different considerations and terminology might be applicable in different circumstances. However, it would be helpful to better understand what's meant by these 3 terms. So can I please firstly ask Transport Scotland to explain the terms exclusion zone, drop zone and danger zone and how they might apply in general, using examples, if this would be helpful. And then secondly, can you please indicate which of the terms you consider applies in this case? I'm just looking for sort of general understanding under this item, and we will discuss the specifics of different types of work under the next agenda item. There's possibly some overlap there, but just really looking to understand the terms in general and which ones apply here.
Yes, so I can answer. So the regulations themselves tend to be quite generic. They don't specifically tell in fact how to carry it works. They give you regulations to say that you must prevent anyone from being injured. And then in addition to those regulations, then what we have is a separate document which is called an accepted or an approved code of practice, which gives further guidance to a contractor to basically carry out works in a safe manner. And the purpose of those documents, that if you comply with those documents, then you can prove in a legal sense that you're doing everything that you possibly can to prevent injury to the public, essentially. So the term danger zone is within so there's none of these terms are within the regulations. The term danger zone is within the accepted or approved code of practice. Exclusion zone and drop zone aren't in any regulations, but essentially danger zone is, I guess, is defined as an area where within the approved code of practice as an area where if you're working at height, that if something happened that you didn't plan, such as a lifting operation failed, or an object fell out of a basket, then, or the movement of a mute, for example, uncontrolled movement, they'd define that as a danger zone. So the best way to eliminate risks in that danger zone is to remove people from that danger zone. And then, to control that, some of the ways in which we would do that is we would set up areas, fencing or whatever, and we would call those, exclusion zones or drop zones. Essentially, you can't go in that area because an item could get dropped. And that's all. I guess those terminologies, exclusion zone and drop zone, are more, based on a specific risk assessment created for a specific task that is a hypothetical task at this stage, because we don't know the full extent of works required.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Does anybody have any comments on that particular point before we move on to just talk about some specifics under the next agenda item? Oh, okay. Just to explore that a bit further, Transport Scotland's hearing statement sets out in response to question 10 of the procedure notice that it's not possible to predict all works that may be required to the bridge in future. I accept this is the case and that specific risk assessments are likely to be required in each instance. But it would just be helpful to spend a wee bit of time exploring the types of considerations that may arise in risk assessments. So the hearing statement refers to several factors: the works being undertaken, the size of loads, lifting methodology, and temporary access equipment used. An example is given of works to remove loose concrete earlier this year, and the likely need for steelwork strengthening in future is also mentioned. So while acknowledging that it's not possible to be definitive or exhaustive, can I please ask Transport Scotland just to expand on these various factors that I've just listed that influence risk assessments for bridge works with reference to examples, if that would help explain them.
Yep, so within the response documents, there are some pictures of failed bits of concrete that have come off the concrete deck. Essentially, what's been happening there above the deck, there's a waterproofing system that should prevent water getting through to the concrete, that prevents corrosion of the steel reinforcement which is within the concrete. That waterproofing system has failed. We're getting deterioration of the concrete deck, which is causing spalling, lumps of concrete falling off the concrete. That happens when the steel within the concrete is corroding, expanding, and pushing essentially the lumps of concrete off the deck. So that is being deteriorating more significantly over the last few years. It tends to happen more rapidly, and that's an example of some of the works that we know that are going to be required to be maintained. What we expect to carry out to maintain that work is we would need to set up either scaffolding or bespoke hanging scaffolding from the deck, and a containment which is probably encapsulated, so that we can then break out concrete, repair the concrete, carry on works. Obviously, building scaffolding above or in close proximity to the public is works that we would rather, the best way is to, again, eliminate public from any interface when we're building works on the bridge deck. And so, the best way that we can think of to eliminate risk is to reduce the amount of people in the vicinity of these works. There's other works. There's concrete deck, and then that concrete deck is supported by steel boxes. Those steel boxes, I think I mentioned earlier, need to be blasted with grit, and the purpose of that is to remove the paint and then carry out spray painting. Again, to carry out that work, we need scaffolding, full containment, and to erect that. We would want to create exclusion zones below the bridge. That.
Just quickly, I would like to point out, along with David's comment, as the existing houses that we do have around the bridge, any works we carry out, we regularly get complaints regarding debris and noise, even when we do put in all the mitigating factors in place. And they are the ones, am I right, Dave, on the north side? And they are a bit further away than proposed dwelling is set to be.
Yeah, we do. I do have that particular point under just one of the agenda items that's just about to come up, so we can maybe touch on that shortly. Any other sort of comments that Transport Scotland would like to make in terms of examples of issues or considerations that might arise here before I invite other parties to make any comments? Okay, does the council have anything to add at this point? And the applicant? No. Okay.
Can I just add, Mr. McLean? Stepping on Jason or David's toes, the bridge was built in 1964, so maintenance wouldn't necessarily have been an immediate issue in probably the 20, 30 years afterwards. However, now we're aware we've obviously got the new bridge to the west, which was built on the back of the fact that we were concerned that the Forth Road Bridge itself was no longer up to the job, up to able to carry the traffic, and it was deteriorating at quite a rate. So it's the maintenance issues that we have now and going forward, which are the challenge that we face.
Okay, thank you. So just picking up the point that was alluded to just now, I'd like to just briefly consider the impact of the existing development that's there on bridge works. That has briefly been touched on slightly earlier in the meeting as well, but in particular including the houses just to the east of the bridge at Ferrybarns Court. So Transport Scotland states in its hearing statement that the existence of these properties makes bridge maintenance more difficult and costly. I suspect the answer to this, we've touched on some of the issues already, but is there anything else that Transport Scotland would like to highlight in terms of ways that these properties impact on bridge maintenance, or any further examples?
Maybe not specifically, but my understanding is what I've been told is that BETA, Forth Estuary Transport Authority, who used to maintain the Forth Road Bridge, did object to the houses being built at Ferrybarns Court, and have made it more difficult. And because they have made it more difficult, I think we're a bit concerned that the more houses that get approved, the closer and closer the houses become, the more challenges that we face in maintaining the bridge safely.
Just to jump in there, and obviously the increase in risk to public as well. As they get closer, the works will get more elongated, which puts risks to the operatives. And because there's more people, there might be an increased risk for that fact alone.
Okay, thank you. Does the council or applicant want to comment on that particular point before we move on? I'm also aware it's just gone 11 o'clock. I did say I'd sort of review progress through the agenda after an hour or so. I think we're a good way through the agenda. If parties are happy to continue, then we can just do that, unless any party feels strongly that we should take a break at this point. Got a few nods for continuing, I think. Yeah, everybody happy just to push on? Okay, that's fine. So item 4D on the agenda, just staying on the topic of the nearby dwellings, and in particular those at Ferrybarns Court that we've just been touching on. Just like to clarify whether the complaints that have been made by residents regarding noise and cleaning works raise only amenity and nuisance considerations for residents, or whether there's also any health and safety implications relevant to those complaints. Again, question for Transport Scotland, first instance, please.
So both, in my understanding, over the last multiple years, essentially last year we were carrying out some resurfacing works, and that resurfacing works in the viaduct was very noisy, and we received numerous complaints from residents in North Queensferry, and including Ferrybarns Court. But as well as that, we have been recently carrying out a cleaning of gullies. One of the operatives was standing on the road deck, cleaning down pipes, essentially, to drainage. What that operative was unaware of is that the pipe was burst underneath the deck. And so essentially what they were doing is cleaning dirt and debris from the road down the drainage onto houses on Ferrybarns Court. So that required us to go and look after the houses in Ferrybarns Court, cleaning, etc. That I don't know if it's difficult to say whether that was a health and safety nuisance, but I do know previously within the last 10 years before we became operating company, there's been issues with paint spray that has been travelled from the bridge onto houses within North Queensferry, which is a health and safety consideration if inhaled by residents.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Obviously, that shouldn't be escaping our works, but sometimes accidents do occur.
Just a follow-up question on that. If alternative construction methods have been adopted to try and reduce noise or other impacts, as has been mentioned, does that in itself have safety considerations for workers or residents? I know it's been touched on that if works take longer, in itself is a consideration. Is there any sort of other considerations that you wanted to flag in this context?
Yeah, so this is the hierarchy of risk controls. You can put lots of control measures in place to prevent these things happening, but the best way to avoid these things is by, and the one the health and safety regulations tell you to do is to eliminate the risk, and the only way to eliminate the risk is to reduce the amount of people.
Okay, thank you. Do any other parties want to come in on this particular point? Shaking heads from the council, if that can have anything to comment. Okay, yeah, Forbes.
Just there's more a technical point. If you object to the houses in Ferrybarns Court when the application went in, being a statutory consultee, did the planning department not take your considerations and your objections into consideration, or obviously with just one house, obviously it didn't go through the same process, or did it go through the same process of being referred to the Scottish ministers at the time?
I'm
sorry,
comments to be made on that, although it's potentially not directly relevant to this application, but happy for the council or Transport Scotland to comment.
We don't know. We don't look into that matter, but we don't know what the process was for the determination of the application, and if Transport Scotland were a statutory consultee or they objected, or what the process was following that. Know that information.
I'm sorry, did you want to come in, Mr. Bishop?
I just said the same thing. I've only been advised that. I don't know. I don't have any details myself.
I don't know when the houses were actually constructed or the application came in, but it may not have been Transport Scotland that was in place. It may have been either the Scottish Office Development or Scottish Executive Development, possibly even just FETA and Forth Road Bridge Joint Board rather.
That's fine. Move on to item 4E now, which I'd just like to explore the agent of change principle, which applies to noise-sensitive developments and is set out in National Planning Framework 4, NPF 4, Policy 23E. In light of the evidence regarding noise impacts from the bridge affecting existing residents, just like to confirm whether parties consider the proposal would be a noise-sensitive development and therefore whether the agent of change principle would apply. Could I ask the council to comment on that initially, please?
Well, the glossary in NPF 4, as with section 41E, doesn't explicitly apply the agent of change principle to roads. It only specifically references cultural venues and facilities, houses and businesses. I think it's reasonable to say if the principle wasn't intended to apply to in relation to a transportation infrastructure, I would have expected to see reference to road, rail or such like, which we don't in the glossary definition or in section 41A. If the principle is considered to apply, it's worth noting that there are already a number of arguably more noise sensitive receptors, class 9 houses in similar noise sensitive positions relative to the bridge. And in that context, I find it difficult to see how this proposal before us would add significantly to the noise sensitivity of the environment around the bridge.
Okay, just before I ask any other parties to comment, do I take from what you just said that you consider the particular nature of this proposed use to be less noise sensitive than a class 9 dwelling house for permanent occupation?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Do other parties have any comments on that? I'll start with Transport Scotland.
In reading the agent of change, it's really a question: would the house result in noise which would be unacceptable to the bridge, which seems, absolutely would not be the case. However, given the bridge has been there since 1964, it would be the design of the house which would need to take into account mitigation to mitigate the potential noise and the works that might take place on the bridge. I wasn't 100% sure where you were headed with this question, to be honest with you, but
it's worth picking up. I suppose just to clarify the glossary, the principle is about new uses that may be noise sensitive and whether they issues for existing uses. And the glossary indicates that if the principle does apply, the applicant is required to demonstrate both that they have assessed the potential impact on occupants of the proposed development and that the proposed design incorporates appropriate measures to mitigate this impact. That's in the context of noise. So I suppose it's just to try and explore whether parties consider that the principle does apply, and if it does apply, whether the proposal addresses the need for any appropriate mitigation measures.
Well, it's certainly clear from our history of the properties to the east that there's insufficient mitigation has been applied, if you like, for the noise impacts of the bridge. I'm sure of a new property, I'm sure Mr. Forbes and his client would build a property which had mitigated for it. As far as the dwelling have an impact on the bridge, I think that would not be the case from a noise point of view.
I can see Mr. Forbes has a hand up. I can see the council also want to come in. I'll turn to you, Mr. Forbes. I think you've been waiting longest.
Thank you. The noise mitigation generally being a holiday home, which is applications for. We're not expecting to be occupied during the day. Most of the time at holiday home, they'll be there at night time, and I would expect there are no works to be happening on the bridge, and they'll be out during the day. So I didn't. Fire mitigation measures I've done against the street, which you mentioned, the junction street, and it was being right next to the bypass. Our noise mitigation measures and incorporated into that design that alleviated any traffic noise. Now, obviously, we're talking about maintenance, not continuous maintenance, but occasional maintenance. The noise levels have dropped significantly because the amount of traffic over that bridge is hugely reduced. But you still get noise coming from the other bridge now. So any house down there, I propose to put some noise mitigation measures into the ventilation system, into the window system. That would counteract any adverse noise coming in from existing traffic on the new Forth Road and new Queens Ferry crossing, or in the future if there was maintenance carried out. I don't see it being an issue at all.
Okay, thank you. I think the council wanted to come back in.
Yeah, maybe just comment on the sort of the potential need for a noise report. I think it's important to underline that what was approved was for holiday accommodation, not a Class 9 residential property, as Brian kind of clarified that the sensitivity of a residential property in our view would be greater than what's been approved for holiday accommodation. We wouldn't be expecting the same level or be as concerned about the noise environment for the occupants of the house. And we're obviously aware that in terms of other legislation, that traffic road noise is not a statutory noise nuisance. And I think I would just comment that, if a noise impact assessment had been thought to have been required, given what we've heard today in terms of the unknowns, the lack of works on this site over the last number of years, I think it would probably be difficult to agree and set parameters and assess the noise impact assessment based upon unknowns as has been set out here. So it's really just wanted to make that distinction between what has been approved and what we consider to be the more sensitive noise environment associated with the house.
Okay, thank you. Just before we move on, just in light of what's been said on that point, does any party want to comment on the need or otherwise for any conditions in the event that ministers approve the application? They will need to consider potential conditions. Our report to ministers will need to recommend potential conditions. There are conditions in the council's report to committee. Is the council content with those, or are there any additional or amended conditions picking up on the noise discussion that we've just had that you'd like to flag at this point? Question to the council, really. If ultimately, are you content with the conditions in your committee report?
Yes.
Does any other party have any comment on that particular point before we move on? No. Okay. One final point under item 4, point 4F on the agenda. Transport Scotland has indicated that it considers the proposal may hamper the use of drones for bridge inspection due to the need to maintain minimum distances to properties. Just wanted to ask Transport Scotland to please clarify what minimum distances would apply and what these are based on, so I can understand what implications that might have in this case. So again, question for Transport Scotland, please.
So drone surveys aren't my area of expertise by any means, but I understand that they require civil aviation licenses, and that license normally requires a 50-metre clearance between residential properties and the drone. I think there are exceptions to that. I don't know what the exceptions are. Certainly, if we want to carry out drone surveys off the bridge, we want to get in close proximity to the bridge. The closer, the better. And, yeah, more properties will make it more difficult. I don't think impossible.
Okay, thank you. Any other party want to comment on that point? Okay, just taking a note of that, and then we'll move on. So with item 5, we've touched on this to some extent, just regarding the potential for falling debris from the bridge to affect the proposed development. Transport Scotland's further written submissions response refers to this as a concern in relation to vehicles and pedestrians on the bridge, whereas its hearing statement, and I think much of the discussion today, suggests it's concerned about debris from maintenance works. So can I just ask Transport Scotland to clarify its position on whether the concern is about maintenance or vehicles on the bridge, or both?
The answer is certainly both. We have had instances in the past where members of the public have thrown things from bridge, and there is signage on the bridge requesting that public do not do that. Certainly something out with our control, but certainly a risk. It's as a risk on the south side of the bridge as it is on the north side of the bridge. Both are concerned.
Okay, Mr. Cheetham?
Could I ask, is there a mechanism to currently make this a private meeting? I've got something to raise that's of a sensitive nature that needs to be considered. I don't want to make public. I know it's live, isn't it, currently?
Just bear with me a moment, and okay. I'll just discuss that with my colleague. What I propose to do, if there's evidence that you want to share that you would not wish to be in the public domain, is that we return to that at the very end of the meeting. And that what we could do is stop the webcast at that point and then just have a final discussion before we close the meeting. So if parties are content with that, I think that's possibly the best solution. So in which case, if there's any other points to raise now on the question of debris or from Transport Scotland before I ask other parties for any comment. Just a related question then at 5B is coming back to the point about material planning considerations in the context of debris from the bridge. Council's committee report indicates it considers this is not a material planning consideration. So I'd like firstly to confirm if that remains the council's position, and then also seek the views of other parties on that particular point. So starting with the council, please.
Yeah, our position is as set out in the committee report that items or debris falling from the bridge isn't a material planning consideration.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Transport Scotland want to comment further on that particular point?
We'd have thought that debris, particularly concrete from failure of the deck falling onto a house or a property below would be a material consideration and the safety implications.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant want to comment on this point?
Yeah, I don't see it being a material consideration at all. You know, if any debris got hit the house, it will need growing, or will need to be sent in a horizontal direction before it goes in that vertical direction. So, yeah, there's a possibility of people throwing things, but I wouldn't expect a falling piece of debris to fall in an arch that would travel 15 meters in which it would be able to hit the building, unless it was given a fair bit of thrust in the first instance. So we don't consider it a material consideration.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. So item 6, and leaving aside the point that we've just touched on that we might need to come back to at the end of the meeting. Item 6 was really just an opportunity for parties to make any other relevant points that we've not already covered today, bearing in mind there's no need to repeat things that are already covered in written submissions, simply for the sake of it. I've got one or two possible follow-up questions that I'll just run over before I invite other parties to comment or raise any other matters. But just, I suppose, a sort of wrap-up question. There's been discussion today on the potential impacts of the proposal on the Forth Road Bridge in relation to a range of issues, and I've also touched on whether or not some or all of these are material planning considerations. And we've also heard about impacts on existing development. But in light of that, I would just like parties to give me their views on the magnitude of the proposal's impacts on the matters that we've discussed. So in other words, how significant would the impact of the proposal be compared to the existing situation? I think it makes sense to start with Transport Scotland again, please, on this point.
I'll just pick up on that, David, for the time being. I think what we try to allude to today, try to make clear today, is that the house itself, the dwelling itself, we can get round it. We can do most of our maintenance procedures and the likes that are required, and our inspection procedures that are required. But it's the additional challenges and the additional complications that the house itself brings into play. As soon as you put in a property which is occupied, there's health and safety risks associated with the occupants of that property. But as I alluded to earlier, there are also the health and safety risks associated with our operatives. Any challenges or anything which extends the time that the guys have to be underneath the bridge or doing their jobs, that's an additional risk and safety implication for them. We can get around all these things. We know we can get around all these things. There is a cost implication, which is not a material consideration in this particular instance, but it's the health and safety of our operatives and the health and safety of the people living in the property which would be our concern, and we think those are definitely material considerations.
Just maybe a follow-up question on that, just so that I'm completely clear. Obviously, there's a concern regarding the safety of inspection and maintenance activities. It's clear that concern relates to the development and to operatives. Is there also a concern in relation to the structural integrity of the bridge itself and the safety of bridge users by extension?
The dwelling itself can't impact structural integrity on the bridge unless it prevents us doing works to maintain the bridge. So
I suppose that was where I was going with that question, in terms of if the development were to inhibit inspection and maintenance works, does that lead to a concern regarding the bridge itself and its integrity?
Yeah, if we can't do our work, then it will impact negatively on the bridge, and over the long term condition, it could cause safety concerns for the bridge.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Do other parties have any comments on what's just been said? Yeah, to see the council wants to come in, please.
Just to touch on a few of the points there, the impact of the proposed holiday accommodation on the structural integrity of the bridge is not a material planning consideration. I think as we've already heard, there's ways around it, and obviously the health and safety matters raised will be covered through other legislation with planning, which govern such operations. And we've also heard there's separate legislation in terms of access to land out with Transport Scotland's control where it's needed in an emergency. So I'd just like to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that? I didn't want to come in at all. Yep, Mr. Forbes.
This originally started back in 2017. My client's parents were getting elderly. They did go into nursing homes, care homes, and the whole idea of the original development was to be an income generator. Subsequently, my father has passed away. This remains at our mother and is in care home. The income generator was to assist with care home fees, but subsequently, obviously, their savings during that period of time, which is 5-6 years, has now dwindled away as paying care home, and that's why my client would be considering selling the land to Transport Scotland to help offset any further care home fees, which previously was as a development to be an income generator. Now, obviously the Transport Scotland offered back in 24th of February to buy the land, but at basic land value costs. My question would be, my client's willing to sell it if we get planning permission, and they would be given the first opportunity to purchase the land without it going on them, without us proceeding with the development. But that would be at the value of a plot rather than just as a bit of land. Now, whether or not that cost would be too excessive for Transport Scotland, it would be a decision that they'd have to make. But that how valuable this piece of land is to them to maintain their safe access for the bridge. So things have changed over the years from when this first started with myself and my client. So I think that's why it's now at a point where to let the land go. But that's something for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's probably not something we need to resolve in the session today, unless there's any other comments that people want to make. Are there any other matters that we haven't touched on that any of the parties think are relevant to the proposal in relation to the matter that we're discussing today in terms of the impact on the Forth Road Bridge? Yeah, Mr. Cheetham.
Just quick kind of note. When we do works on the bridge, it's normally 24 hours. So it would be, if you've got a holiday let, you might have issues with people trying to sleep while we're grinding away or digging away. And there's also probably one that we can't plan for. But what happens if the structure becomes a motorway again? Has planning also been considered for that? Or don't you do that as a matter of course? Because the current use of the bridge might change in the future. Is that something that you normally consider?
Happy for other parties to respond to that. Mr. Forbes?
Yeah, as I said, we have done noise mitigation measures, and there's still a significant amount of noise comes from the Queensferry crossing traffic.
Okay. Does council want to comment on that point at all?
I was going to just reiterate our earlier point in terms of the noise standards internally and external for residential wouldn't apply to this property because it's not a residential property.
Okay, thank you. Any other points on other matters before we conclude? Mr. Boyer, do you have any points to raise? No. Okay, I've not forgotten the request to just cover one more matter at the end of the webcast. I think what I'll do for the sort of benefit of any parties watching online is just run through my sort of intended closing remarks, and then we can see if we can stop the webcast rolling and just briefly come back to that point. So I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance and their participation today. It's certainly been a very useful session. In terms of next steps, having considered all the points made in today's sessions and reviewed our notes of the discussion, assuming that we consider we now have sufficient information to complete our report to ministers, we'll proceed to do so as quickly as possible. And it will then be for ministers to consider our reports and recommendations and decide whether or not to grant planning permission. So what I'll do now is just briefly pause and we'll ask for the webcast to be paused. So if I can just ask parties to bear with us just for a moment and we'll reconvene as soon as we can.